Welcome to the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are visiting with Adam Tank, who is the co-founder of Transcend Software. Now, for any of you that know me personally know that I love disruptive technology, and especially those things that challenge the status quo and the way that we think about things. And so before we get too technical, Adam, one of the things that I loved about Transcend is that you're approaching water and wastewater from a very, very unique perspective. And, I'm going to let you tell the story behind it and who you're working with and why. But what do you think? This might be controversial, but what do you think folks in our industry are getting wrong about water and wastewater, just like on a gut level? Why does that misunderstanding, matter for the future of the industry and even our environment and our supply of water? And what is causing us to either underinvest or ignore?
Wonderful question.
Loaded question.
This
Loaded.
could be an hour-long discussion in and of itself for
All right.
sure. So I'll give you two thoughts, and I have to provide a bit of context based on my
Absolutely.
history in the industry. So I have largely spent my time in innovation roles, whether that's digital innovation or equipment or chemical innovation. I've been at companies as big as GE Water, and
Mhm.
I've been at innovative startups as small as 5 people. So
Okay.
it's really, really run the gambit in the industry. I've looked at technologies inside the fence of treatment infrastructure. I've looked at technologies outside the fence and distribution and billing and metering and all these things. And the one thing that I think, and I find myself guilty of this too, oftentimes, that we get wrong, is that innovation in many cases doesn't make sense in this industry. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we talk a big game about it, and we know that we're laggards and that we're super conservative, and that right we tend to sort of go with what's tried and true. And while I agree that those things are generally quite true, um, there also is a lot of flash of innovation. We have a lot of funding coming into the industry. We have a lot of startups popping up around innovation. We have a lot of people in big companies talking about innovation and accelerators and right, all of these other things that we're doing.
Right.
At the end of the day, this industry is basically everything that we do, every action that we take is predicated on risk. So it's the risk of not treating something to a standard and it harms people. It's the risk of investing tomorrow versus investing today. It's the risk of the way that we properly or improperly communicate the value of the work that we do to the general population. And so, unless innovation can help tackle the risk factor, I think we have it all wrong. Because most of the time we think about innovation in terms of how much money can it save? How much money can we make? How much easier will it make our lives? How will it help us recruit into the sector? And everyone will sort of look at us as really, really fun and flashy and whatever.
Right.
But ultimately, it's all about risk. So that would be my sort of hot take, is that innovation in this industry doesn't make sense for the reasons that I just outlined.
Right. I thank you. That was great because that kind of sets me up for what I wanted to ask you, because something that Transcend does, or what it does, is it's helping create what you coined as generative engineering. And what I want you to tell our audience now, and why you started to develop this product or this software, is the simplest before versus after picture of what that means. And really, what you're talking about risk and managing risk is that choosing the tried and true, the old way of doing things, and that how this works in helping organizations, whether they be treatment as a service company, private sector, public sector, wastewater, engineering firms, is that what does it help them do to overcome some of those things, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
innovating just for the sake of bright, shiny object syndrome, of, innovating for the sake of innovating, but being able to make the right decision and put together the right combination of the old tried and true with something that maybe is groundbreaking that can really shift the needle.
Yes. So if we think about what happens in a water or wastewater treatment capital project, for some reason there's a need to do something. So there could be population expansion, so we need to build new infrastructure. There could be a
Mm,
new regulation that comes down the pipe that requires us to treat our water or wastewater differently. There could be a contaminant of concern that we're worried about that we need to get out. And then there's, of course, a whole bunch of variables within those things. So population growth could be high, medium, low. Temperature of the influent might change based on an industrial manufacturer moving in. There's just so many variables
right.
that we can't account for in the earliest phases of projects because one, we don't have a crystal ball, and two, we don't have the time or budget to assess all of the possibilities that we might need to in order to make an effective decision. So what ends up happening? Typically, a utility or engineering consultant goes back to a past project or a similar project and they say, well, we built something similar to this, or we expanded a facility or upgraded something similar to this. So we think it's going to cost us about this much. And we really like this technology because it works. And so that's the technology that we're going to choose. And then we spend 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months planning and tinkering around the sort of set of possibilities that we know that are, I'm not going to say risk free, but maybe have been risk managed over time.
That's a good way of putting it.
The difference in what happens with asset owners or utilities and engineering consultants and even equipment suppliers using our software before and after, today in status quo, we can only assess maybe one or two options for how we want to tackle a water wastewater treatment plant project. And so we assess it, we design it, we construct it, and then maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years later, we have this operating asset that may or may not reflect the reality that asset is now operating in because it's been 10 years
Mm-hmm.
since we made those decisions with imperfect information. Now, when you bring software into the picture in the earliest phases of projects and you allow generative engineering or engineering that assesses and develops multiple options with multiple variables as early as the planning phase of a project, you can assess a whole range of outcomes and possibilities that you couldn't have otherwise. So you can look at things like what's the total capital cost going to be if I assess 10 different technologies? What's the site footprint going to look like if I choose this technology over this one? What does it look like if we bring in, call it, if we assess a population that grows by 1 million people over the next decade versus 500,000 versus 100,000? And the computer can crunch all of these options with engineering grade logic and provide answers that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. So ultimately, you're making a better decision. You're building a better asset. You may or may not be saving money. You don't know, at least in the short term, but in the long term, you most likely are. And ultimately, the people that benefit most are all of us as taxpayers because we have something that fits the needs of our community when it's constructed into the future, and we're effectively future proofing that asset.
I love that. And if an engineer were to say, "Oh, I want to look at all different types of possibilities," just imagine the time that that would take without software. And there may be things that they may not even be aware of that exist for that particular issue, but the computer, and now with the adoption of AI can do that for you and bring things to the forefront. That's what really caught my eye, is that this is a tool that allows you to become aware of things you may not have even known
Mm-hmm.
existed, that may be the absolute perfect solution that just because this is the way that whole thing tried and true, just because this is the way we've always done it, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to continue
That's
doing
right.
it. Right.
That's right.
So, you talk about all these viable options. And so here's something that I think many people might become afraid of, because sometimes when you give people too many choices, they don't know what to do.
Hmm.
And I was told by my business partner that years ago, there was this shoe salesman that he knew that learned, when this was in those days that when you went to the fancy department stores in the downtown and you said, I want to see these shoes, where the salesman would only bring you out two pairs at a time, even though you
Mm.
might have selected five. Okay. And he would put two. And then it'd be like, okay, well, which one do you want to consider? A or B? And then if they said A only, then he would take B back and say, okay, which one of the next ones would you like to see? But he would only put in two in front of that customer. And they did an experiment that when you added more to the mix, you would lose the sale. They
Yes.
couldn't decide on anything and they'd walk away. But if you only kept giving them two at a time, they would walk out with a purchase. And so, how with this software do you keep more options being presented, turning into analysis paralysis?
Sure. Sure. It's a great question. And there's two ways we think about that today. So the first is that we have developed tools inside of our software that
Okay.
enable that rapid comparison and analysis for users to very quickly determine which option is actually viable versus another. So I would say if somebody creates 100 options in our software, chances are, call it 90% of them may not be feasible. we're
Okay.
just we're literally looking at what is a possibility,
Okay.
right? But you might say, well, no way is that possible, right? It's going to end up being whatever, 10 acres worth of space and we only have three, or right,
Right.
whatever it is. So you're gonna immediately sort of wipe out a large subset of those. But then for those that are left, you're very easily able to compare both just visually. It literally highlights the major differences. So energy consumption, capital cost, land site footprint, right? Those types of things. So you can clearly see like, oh, well, based on what the asset owner, the utility is requesting, these seem most appropriate based on what their needs are. So
Okay.
that's one. The second one is that all of the data that is provided is able to be consumed in formats that people are already used to using. So, as a simple example, we would, our software produces an equipment list. So this is all the major pieces of equipment that go
Oh,
into a project.
okay.
And that comes out both in PDF and Excel. So chances are, if you are someone who has been doing these projects for years and years, you already have spreadsheets comparing
Mm,
different asset type or different types of equipment. You probably have internal costing teams. You have curves that you've run over time. All
right.
of this data is very easily consumed by those existing processes, which make it sort of, I'll call it simple for all intents and purposes to consume those into your existing workflows. So it doesn't add a whole lot more work because the comparison is relatively easy inside of our software, and then you can also export the data in a way that makes it easy for you or your teams to do that comparison as well.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So we know about, we talked about risk, but I love this. We talked about this offline, and you said it's a safe to fail way
Yes.
um, to test innovation without putting operators' careers on the line. Because if they select something or say to the engineer, I want this, and it goes sideways, guess who's going to get thrown under the bus? Somebody's in
Hmm.
the role. And so, if using a software like this, something, I wrote some things down about that, you know, what can you use this to maybe almost like a pilot, and that who needs to be at the table from an engineering perspective? Who needs to be at the table early so that if you decide, okay, this looks good, I want to pilot it, so the pilot either doesn't fall flat on its face or it doesn't die in procurement. Like, let's say you proved it. Okay, it's great. We want this. How can we get it over the hump into the next phase? Like,
Hmm.
this is the thing that we definitely want to use.
Yes. So I think sort of what we started the conversation off with, a reason that a lot of projects fail is that we don't assess all of the options and have imperfect information at the start of projects. So that's one reason. The other one is, which you just alluded to, is that we don't have the right people around the table at the beginning. So very often we design and then construct something that is very difficult to operate. As one simple example, and you will hear operators right until they're red in the face saying, I wasn't involved in these decisions. How did somebody come up with this poor design? Why is it that there is a pump that is stuffed behind a chemical dosing system that I can't reach to maintain? All of these things
Yeah.
that had they been in those early design reviews or even as early on in planning, those things could have been eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have today manually, we literally don't have the time and money to be able to do that work. Like we can't bring those people in. We can't develop the designs to that level of detail because it's literally impossible. Nothing would ever get done. So to the extent that you can have a sort of like call it like a co-pilot or a software in our case that is in those rooms that rapidly produces this level of detail and the fidelity, then you bring in people that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. Could even be regulators, operators, obviously the engineers. You could have the leaders at the asset owner. All of these people, when they're in the room talking together at the beginning, the constructors, you develop something that's much more feasible, much more operatable that everyone is really bought into from day zero. Now, on the equipment side, you want to assess something, call it new or innovative, that maybe hasn't been done before. Chances are in our industry it has. It's just not in your state or not in your
Right.
country. So you're unwilling to
Yeah,
look
there you
at
go.
it.
In your country, because there's a lot of stuff happening in Canada and in Europe that is absolutely groundbreaking. What do they always ask? So where has it been done here? Does it really matter that it's been done in your state? And I would say, you made a comment about, is that really good decision making and good governance? Because if it's worked successfully in something that's similar to you, but it doesn't matter. Let's say it's in France. Just because they're speaking French and you're speaking, does it really matter if the principles and the results gets you to where you want to be?
Right.
I think
Right.
that is a mindset that we definitely need to break.
I agree.
There is so much really good stuff. I don't want to say cool or getting away from that bright shiny object, but stuff that is proven, that is groundbreaking, that's really making strides in this industry and other parts of the world that we need to be more open to taking a look at. And this is why I love this software, because this software is able to see those things that are happening in other parts of the world and bring them to the table and say, Mr. Miss, you need to look at this.
That's exactly right.
It's not risky because other people are using it with great success. So the risk, basically, you're not going to be the first one that's ever tried it. Other people have tried it. They're just not in your backyard. So what does it matter?
And here's the data to back it up.
Exactly.
Here is I mean, if you were to print out all of the outputs that the software produces, you'd probably have a stack of 100 sheets. That is the process calculations, the mechanical equipment selection and sizing, literally the 3D geometry of the rooms, including the structures and the slabs and everything. So you could take this paper to a regulator and say, here is why I made this decision. And here is why I believe that we are appropriately managing the risk and choosing this option for what the likely outcomes are. We don't do that today. We would have to put that onus on the vendors to do that. And the vendors are, I mean, they're super busy too, right? They don't have teams of engineers that can afford to produce all this documentation and
Right.
data just to bid on a project that they may or may not win.
So let's talk about that, the bidding process and how a software like this can help. Not now, it's already helping you in the planning process and making the decisions of what is the best solution or solutions.
Right.
Your options. What are getting it down to the short list, like a candidate for a job. which is going to be, who's going to be the best candidate right now that we're going to try or choose. So who are the folks that can benefit most from, I want to get into the software of using this software, and what are the takeaways and benefits of it? And then if they decide, wow, I'd really like to give this a try, how does it work to be able to use Transcend Software?
Mm-hmm. So we serve three primary segments in the industry. We
Okay.
work directly with asset owners or utilities.
Mm-hmm.
We work with engineering consulting firms,
Yes.
and we work with equipment suppliers.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep. And all three use our software somewhat differently. So for utilities and asset owners, they're primarily using it for capital planning. So assessing that realm of options, trying to narrow in on one, and then maybe handing that over to an engineering consultant to take it through final review and detailed design. The engineering consultants themselves are using it for preliminary design and more design-focused activities. If they're helping utility do capital planning, they'll also use it there, but more often they're using it for design type work. And then the third, the OEMs, they're in a bit of a different category in the
Hmm.
sense that they're using our software to design their own systems and produce their own proposals so that they don't have to spend all that time to bid and win on work. Because as an OEM, if your engineering teams are tied up working on proposal work, that means they're not working on project execution, detailed design, cost recoverable stuff. So if you can free them up by allowing them not to focus on proposals and budgetary proposals and early stage design and instead on stuff that will actually make the company money, then that's a win for those teams.
You mentioned something about not having to go out for bid and avoiding that RFP. How does that work? How does that? Yeah,
That
I'm sure everybody's like, wait, how can getting
right,
the RFP? How
right.
does that work? I want to know more about that.
Yeah, very that would be very uncommon, of course, because most of this there are public procurement processes, so we
Right.
can't bypass those things. But you can more effectively position yourself in advance of an RFP. So imagine that you are an engineering consultant that knows that your local utility or your partnered utility has to do some sort of upgrade in the next, say, 5 to 10 years. You can go in and have a proactive conversation and run some options in advance and show them that level of detail that you would provide to that process and start to position yourself more really as a trusted partner early on than sort of just as another consultant, right? Another sort of flavor of the week, if you will. The other thing I will say is that and what gets me really excited about all of this is that our engineering consultants and our utilities, when they're using our software to do capital planning or preliminary design, and they're working through those options, OEMs are able to put their equipment inside the software natively. So if I'm an engineering consultant or a utility, and I'm saying, hey, I think I might want an activated sludge plant or an MBR plant or a fixed film plant. In our software, we have equipment vendors who are basically checkboxes. And the second the utility or consulting engineer checks it, of course, they're going to get data that's backed by the OEM to show how their equipment would work in that project, which positions the OEM very well in advance of an RFP. But the
Ooh.
other thing is that the OEM gets notified that their equipment is being considered in a capital planning phase or preliminary design phase of a project, and then that becomes an actionable lead for them. So if I say Black& Veatch runs a design and I'm looking at a DuPont MBR, DuPont says, oh man, there must be a project that we should go be chasing. And Black& Veatch has a bunch of data to show why DuPont would be the right membrane of choice for this particular project.
Can this also be used for collection system rehabilitation?
Hmm, great question. So we do vertical assets today. So in the collections and distribution system, we do lift station, pumping, and booster stations, but we do not do sewers or pipes themselves.
Okay. Any plans to do that?
Maybe. We'll see.
I would think, because there's so much competition and also specking and solutions as to what you should use to rehabilitate aging sewer systems or aging distribution or water lines, even stormwater, even stormwater. I would think that that would be a really interesting segue for, your team to
Mhm.
explore. So getting back to the RFP, does the software actually help, or can it be used to help the engineer or the municipality when they're using it for that, for their, to make that choice, to actually develop the RFP that they're going to put out? So it can
Yes.
help them write that.
Undoubtedly. Yes.
Oh,
I mean, it
wonderful.
won't, so like we wouldn't natively, the software wouldn't natively help you like write the actual text of the RFP, but the data generated by the software certainly would inform the RFP. So, oh, you looked at a bunch of options and you decided that these two are the most viable. So those are the ones you're going to include in your RFP. And then here's some base level data around
Okay.
why they were selected and right, basically validating why you chose those.
Oh, excellent. And then another question I had for that was, when you talk about RSC, there's a lot of, this is more for the equipment vendors. There's a lot of these, the procurement boards, such as Source, I think it's Sourcewell and HGAC Buy,
Mm.
different Buy co-stars. There's lots of them out there. Can this software for the manufacturers be used to help them for their submissions for consideration for these buy boards?
So those, I don't know as much about those and their requirements, but we do have OEMs using our software to inform their submissions or their responses to RFPs for sure.
Okay.
So,
So there
you
may
know,
be
if
a way to use it for that, because it's almost like you're presenting your product as a solution that meets a certain criteria on that buy board, so that the city buying doesn't have to go out to bid.
mm,
If they've already decided, I want something of this criteria, here are the three vendors that have it. It's already been, quote unquote, competitively bid.
sure, I see.
So it's eliminating them having, it does save smaller cities, especially because it's almost a little bit like a piggyback contract in a way.
Mm,
I already know this, somebody's already gone out and done the work. I know I need it. I've got now standard pricing. It's not a competitive bid. I know what it's going to cost going in. So that's very, very interesting. So I just wanted to ask, like, how, for those three audiences that we just talked about in a wrap up, how does getting access to use Transcend software work?
so that was the second part of your question, which I failed to answer. So thank you
It's
for reminding
okay.
me. So we are not a company that does pilots. We're not someone that says, here, just try it and see how it goes, because this software is meant to be part of a broader transformation. Just putting this in the hands of an engineer, oftentimes one, they're highly skeptical. So that's a challenge, and they're very it's very difficult to adopt. But the second part is that it's far more about internal workflows and people management and business strategy than it is about the technology itself. So for all those reasons, we operate very consultatively with our customers. So if someone's interested, whether that's an asset owner, an engineering firm, or an OEM, it typically starts with a series of conversations with our team, which, by the way, includes a whole slew of process engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, to understand how you work today and where the technology might be best applied to drive the most value. So, starts with a conversation, simple as that. Once then we have that conversation and we contract, we sell on a recurring subscription basis. So you buy a subscription to the software. It includes any number, as of today at least, any number of users inside of your entity, doesn't matter how many or who. And then we work with you on a process to get it embedded into your workflows and start using it across your projects.
Wow. Okay. I see that shift, that I think this, software as a service, because then you're always getting the latest and greatest version of it, and all of the service is really the way to go. So for those listening who would like to explore this possibility, how can they learn more, get a hold of you? What's the next best step if they think, wow, this is something that I really should consider looking into?
Sure. So transcendinfra.com would be the best place to go. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Adam Tank. Sounds spelled just like it sounds, pretty simple. And then you're welcome to either message me there or email us at info@transcendinfra.com, and we'll be sure to respond.
Well, that's great. Well, Adam, thank you for coming on the show today and having this interesting conversation about how we need to approach the planning and design of projects.
Thank you.
Open ourselves up to a wider, a wider world.
As we say, transcend the status quo, transcend the way that we plan and design. That's how we came up with the name. Yep.
I love it. I love it. Well, audience, I hope you got something out of this. If this, really resonated with you, I tell you, reach out to Adam. Also follow him on his LinkedIn feed, because Adam writes some really, really interesting content. And some of it isn't always related to the industry, but it's always very thought-provoking, and I enjoy it, and I follow him regularly. And so again, thank you. Thank you, Adam, for being here. And thank you, audience, for sharing your time with us this week. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.